My name is Alex Sarek. I'm the EMEA Marketing Director for Ariba. I also represent solutions management within the region. I've been with Ariba for nearly a decade at this point. And over that time, it's really been remarkable to see how procurement as a function has increasingly become a strategic aspect and a contributor of value to organizations. Obviously, protecting the bottom line during the, unfortunately, frequent crises that we've had over the past several years, but also in other ways as well, to reducing supply chain risk and a myriad of other ways that it's contributed to the function. That said, however, there's still a tremendous opportunity for growth and for the function to provide even more value to the organization. And that's a great thing because one, it means there's a lot of value still to be added to organizations. Two, for the function itself, it's a great opportunity to increase its strategic importance and visibility in the organization. And for the professionals within that function, it's a great way to enhance your careers, to actually take advantage of some of these additional ways that you can contribute to your organizations. So I would like to discuss 4 areas today. First, just take a step back, talk a bit about collaboration. Why is important? Why now for the function, particularly with the CFO? Then I'll discuss primarily in the context of some research that we've conducted with about 260 CFOs globally, where the CFO is looking for procurement to add more value, which specific areas. Then I'll talk a bit about the necessary groundwork in place, because the reality is even if you walk away today convinced that you should be working more closely with the CFO, without certain requirements or pillars in place in your organization, you can only go so far. Certain things are really required to enable that. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I'll talk about a few specific strategies that you can employ and a couple success stories that we've seen. So with that, I'll start talking about collaboration. Now, within the organization, there are challenges across all the functions in collaborating, and particularly outside of the 4 walls with your trading partners, in procurement's case, suppliers. When you look at a sourcing professional, to be effective and get the best prices for a range of goods, he needs to collaborate closely with the business units internally. He needs to work with legal on contract requirements, what type of conditions he can offer. He needs to scour the universe of suppliers to find new suppliers of supply, to qualify them, often getting third-party information as well to help him in that process. Then needs to negotiate the contracts and often be tempted to give in on things like payment terms, which AP may have a certain policy on as well. So really should be collaborating with AP on finance on the collaboration. Once the actual order is going through, it needs to ensure that business units are purchasing on contract, work with the suppliers, who the suppliers themselves may often be reaching out to business units directly or to procurement, their contacts, to ask for invoices to be paid quickly because of their needs. So all of this is a highly inefficient process currently with a lot of room for suboptimal decisions to be made. Now, when you expand beyond the case of one supplier, where you have a few counterparts communicating with a few counterparts within your organization, obviously the complexity starts multiplying. And this is just a sample of 3, but you can quickly see how tricky things can get. And when you multiply that beyond your organization and look at broader commerce picture of thousands or hundreds of thousands of companies interacting as sellers, as buying organizations, it's a massively complex process. And it's even worse when you consider that most of these organizations have spent years, perhaps decades, optimizing and customizing their internal processes based on their organizational structure, based on their preferences, based on internal needs and the systems they have. All these processes are not the same, and in many cases, they're trying to force them on their trading partners, force the formats that can be received for bids, for orders, for invoices, force conditions and terms that are inconsistent. And this creates a massive amount of conflict for the organization. One solution would be if everyone just had the same process, and then everyone would communicate perfectly. That would be very simple, but it wouldn't be optimal, and it's not realistic. It's not optimal. Because there are very good reasons why companies have actually customized certain processes. There are differences between them. So that just doesn't work. Now, another approach, which is practical and actually addresses these challenges, is if you had some kind of a translator that allowed each company to have their internal processes, have them seamless, so they're actually working across all your functions, and there's visibility from AP into what payments are pending and so forth. You can work with the business units. And the suppliers can have their own processes, and through this translator still communicate and effectively conduct commerce. Now, the good news is This actually is possible right now in the network economy that we live in right now. There is this translator through business networks, such as the Ariba network, and there are other networks as well out there, through the actual B2B networks with hundreds of thousands of trading partners on them, as well as cloud-based solutions that can tie into your existing systems and connect them to the network and then transmit information back and forth. So you can go through as a sourcing professional and gather requirements internally in one system where all the stakeholders have access to requirements, conditions, sustainability requirements, objectives of the company. You can share information, past experience. You can then scour the universe of suppliers, including suppliers you've never heard of that exist on these networks, and discover suppliers, then pull in third-party information. So in Ariba's case, we have D&B information pulled in. You can pull in sustainability information, qualify those suppliers, bring them on board. When you're actually transacting the order, you can submit it electronically. You can place the order in your existing system, whether it's SAP SRM behind your firewall, Oracle system, an Ariba buyer system, or a cloud-based P2P system. You can continue using that system, but leverage some cloud-based solutions that will integrate with it, give your buyers a more Amazon-like friendly purchasing experience, transact the order over the network. A supplier can have a completely different system, receive it, with one click, convert it into a VAT-compliant invoice, send it back. And all the time, AP can view the status of this. They can view the contracts and see which orders are subject to potential early payment discounts that they can employ. When they're coming, they can feed finance information. How much payment is going to be made over the next month, so they can appropriately plan their working capital processes and how much cash they're going to need in the bank. All of this is possible right now. And to prove it, or one way, is McKenzie actually did a study over a year ago looking at hundreds of organizations, so what they called a network enterprise, companies that use networks and collaborative technologies to collaborate with their trading partners as well as internally, and took a look at what the differences in performance were, if there were any. And remarkably, probably not remarkably that there was a difference, but it was shocking just how drastic it was. They found that what they termed the network enterprise were 50% more likely to be market leaders, to have gained market share, to have increased sales and profit margins since moving towards a network model than companies that were not networked. It's pretty drastic, and I think it's a great example of why collaborate, and why now, the answer being because now it is possible through these networks and these different delivery models and the solutions that can tie in to the systems you already have, that don't require you to change and rip out a big investment that you've already made in the past. Now, from a procurement perspective, this represents a massive opportunity because procurement, by its nature, is really at the epicenter of commerce, dealing with the trading partners with a range of business units and departments within the organization. It can truly benefit from this, and they can help procurement evolve. And this kind of a humorous analogy of the evolution of procurement. If you look back at the early days, one of the earliest references to the function was by Charles Babbage in the early 19th century, called Material Man, in a work of literature he put together, basically someone that buys things. Not very formal. That evolved into more of a transactional, formal function, first with the railroads and then other industries and companies one by one, which was still very tactical but a formal function. And over the past couple of decades, we've seen through spend management with a more holistic view of the end-to-end process of purchasing, and then strategic sourcing, taking non-cost factors and other elements into play, the function evolved into a formal procurement function, and not surprisingly, seeing the leadership jump in many companies to the C-level with the creation of the CPL. And there's been tremendous progress made, as I've said before. Now, the last element here is collaborative commerce is not a procurement-specific function, but this really is the overall concept of business in the network economy. And procurement, being at the epicenter of it, really needs to adopt it if they're going to effectively drive more value to the organization. So with that said, I'd like to jump to the specific topic here, which is how to work with finance. Now, the good news is through a survey that we've done with CFO Research Services of about 260 CFOs across Europe, North America, and Asia, CFOs actually do see procurement being more and more strategic. Nearly 3/4 actually said procurement is more strategic than it was just 3 years ago, which is a great sign. So they're definitely noticing the impact. When asked what are some areas where procurement can actually add more value, a couple things I want to highlight here. First, probably not surprisingly, the top was through additional cost savings, finding more opportunities. Now, I don't think this is surprising. I would foresee that certainly this will always remain a top, if not the top priority for the function. However, there are 2 points that really were quite remarkable from this. One is, even though the CFOs could pick a few different functions or a few different areas, not even 3/4, a little less, actually selected cost savings as one of the top ways that procurement can add more value. Now, I think that's partially a realization that you can only cut costs so far, and partly a shift to seeing procurement as being able to add value in other areas. And that's a great thing. The second is some of these other areas which aren't far behind cost, one wouldn't have really seen a few years ago. When you look at managing working capital, managing risks to business performance, financial risk, these are all financial metrics. So CFOs really increasingly are looking to purchasing and hoping that they're going to add more value and see the opportunity there. And even strengthening relationships with suppliers, that's a broader context of collaboration. So they really do see the opportunity and are hoping that procurement is going to add more value. That said, it's not all rosy. Clearly when we asked about where procurement is currently as far as adding good ideas to add value in these financial objectives, a minority actually said that they actually view procurement as providing a lot of good ideas and adding value here. It's about a little over 40%, so less than half. So they clearly see the opportunity, but they're not seeing the impact yet. When asked some of the areas that they can add value, you can see as a list here, or what they need to do to improve. There are clearly a few things, particularly on skills, from risk analysis, understanding financial metrics, that they're looking for the function to improve over the coming years. Oh, someone's cell phone. So what really needs to be done to actually lay the right groundwork and add value? And we've, working through many of our customers, as well as some of the research that we've done, there are really 3 areas that I've seen that are critical for procurement to really do an effective job at collaborating with finance. And all organizations that have done a good job at this have really done a good job addressing all of these. The first being automation. And I'll go into a bit more detail on each in a moment. The second is skill development. So this is really the last slide, improving the skills within the function. And the last is communication, which is a critical component to actually have the right communication model in place. From an automation perspective, the key rationale here is automation frees up capacity within the team. By eliminating the transactional work, you free up capacity to do more strategic work. Unless you're in an enviable position of having procurement with lots of time in their hands sitting around, you can't simply start collaborating more, taking on new responsibilities, new projects, without something giving. And the real answer is automation. By automating that transactional work, you free up capacity within the function to actually do more. Automation also provides great visibility within procurement, but also across functions, to AP, to other elements, about the state of current contracts, the state of orders. That's very important to working with the CFO. And the last point I also wanted to highlight here is it also changes the perception of what's possible. It was interesting that when we broke up the survey results between companies that were already considered a network enterprise and collaborating with the CFO and using business networks, and then they asked the same question about whether they thought there was opportunity to work with the CFO. A majority, or roughly a little over 50% of ones that actually leveraged a commerce network felt that there was great opportunity. Whereas companies that did not use any type of collaborative technology or network, it was 30-some% that actually felt that there was significant opportunity. So just by having a network in place and the capability, automatically raised the perception of what was actually possible in an organization. And then when you look at automation, there are a few things that we'd recommend as best practices. One is automate the entire source to settle process and do it in an integrated process with an integrated solution. This is very important because if you have siloed elements, you're going to lose pieces. If you can't view the contracts when you're looking at the orders and AP can't see which orders are eligible for early payment discounts, it's very hard for them to actually know when to apply it, for example. So that's very critical, and the integration also improves the efficiency as well because you don't have the inefficiency of the breaks between your process. You also want to ensure that you capture all the critical information in the systems. You want the contract details, the early payment discounts in there, information that's critical for the other departments, all within the system and accessible to improve visibility in the cash flow and other elements. And the last one here is connect to the right community. So when you're evaluating the solutions, it's important to not just look at specific features and functions from your process, but also take a look at what's the community that's going to connect you to, both internally and externally. So is it going to allow you to share templates, contract repositories, and so forth with the other functions? Is it going to access you to suppliers? Is it going to enable you to offer new financing options to your suppliers to meet financial objectives? Is it going to allow to pull in third-party information to qualify the suppliers, whether it's risk information, sustainability information, whatever is necessary to do your job? All of that's possible, and it's important to look at exactly what the solution is going to connect you to, beyond just what the features and functions. Because ultimately, it's about having the right information in a seamless process. And if you have to keep jumping to different places, well, you might be able to get it, but no one else is going to be able to see it, and it's just not going to be as efficient. From a skills perspective, and this gets back to the one comment or the survey results from the CFO, there clearly is a lot of room for improvement. From a risk and analytical perspective, most purchasing professionals probably don't have quite the right skill set. I don't know too many that really understand the concept of working capital management, how to reduce financial risk, how to improve visibility in the cash flow, and what type of requirements are there. These are things that naturally were not part of the procurement function, so you're going to have a gap in the skill set here. Now, a couple of things to do from a near-term perspective. Training is really the right way. And what we've seen is the companies that are effective at this have that training done by their internal finance departments. It's not going out and getting a course online or something. I mean, that can benefit as well. I don't want to disparage it. But you're going to get a lot of benefits by having it done internally. One, you'll start improving on the third one, communication. But two, you can also bring up in the course of training relevant examples for your company and the specific requirements, which are as important as just understanding the basic concepts. And ultimately, you can also modify job profiles for new candidates coming in to bring people with this type of a skill set. And the last area is communication. So this is absolutely critical, and one of the top obstacles to actually doing this that was highlighted by the CFOs was cultural resistance. And that's telling, because naturally, or just by default, the functions AP, finance, or procurement don't necessarily communicate. They're often not co-located. They usually don't have too much of a reason to communicate unless there's some mechanism in place. Now, from a requirements perspective, you really want to make sure that you have the right contacts, that you start building a culture of collaboration, and then you start tying the processes together. Clearly, having the CFO and the CPO set the example by communicating and from a top-down communicating the strategy and what that applies for each department is critical. Another effective strategy that we've seen is co-locating someone from finance with procurement. That ideally could be someone that does the training, and they can work through the sourcing, through various processes in procurement to interject where it's important to involve finance and also interject the right strategy from there. And joint projects to test the waters are a great way to do this. That's something that could come out of the training. It's a great way to start and actually build momentum and show the success that you can have. So with that, I'd like to talk about some of the specific strategies. And I'll talk about the discount last, because I'd like to highlight that one a little bit more. One is, I talked before, source to settle solutions. Deploying integrated solutions is going to be critical, and what I'd like to highlight here, again before, is involve AP and the other functions in the decision-making process, because there are certain requirements that would be very important to them that you may not consider. So for example, Ariba has trademarked this PO flip capability, which allows any supplier with email access to, with one button, convert a PO into a VAT-compliant invoice. That's a great tool for finance because it eliminates AP from having to deal with a whole bunch of paper, a whole bunch of errors. And while we talk about freeing procurement to be more strategic, most AP departments aren't sitting around either. They're swamped up to their heads with piles of paper. That eliminates that process, gives them more capacity to actually work with you and engage and actually collaborate. So that's a critical element. And of course, it reduces process costs. And by having those, it improves the forecasting and visibility and the cash flow that finance is often looking at, because it is remarkable how difficult it can be to forecast cash balances for the CFO and the treasurer in organizations. The bottom one out here is leveraging finance options. And this is something that you may not do directly, but it's important to understand the company's strategy, what you can offer, and you can use this either as a negotiating strategy, you can use it as part of your solution selection process if you're going to be able to have access to different types of financing. For example, some companies are very willing to offer supply chain financing. It gives your certain suppliers, strategic suppliers, lower cost of capital, but it does put you at risk. At the same time, companies that may not want to do that can offer receivables financing. You don't have to do anything. You simply access a network that offers receivables financing, and suppliers that need cash quickly can sell or auction off their accounts receivables and get money from that from third parties, and you're not really involved at all. Now, the cost is going to be higher to them, but for many, it's still better than what they can do just going out and taking out a loan. And in either case, you certainly want to coordinate with finance and the company policy and strategy. And this has a lot of benefits from reducing supply chain risk, reducing the cost, and it can give you a lot more leverage in negotiations. If you're offering a supplier a lower cost of capital than they can have otherwise, it can help you negotiate a better price. Now, the top one I want to focus on is optimizing discounts. And this is an area of huge opportunity, particularly in Europe, where I still struggle to understand why they're not used as much as they should be. And really what you need to do here is negotiate more early payment discounts into the contracts and deploy solutions that can actually track it. It's great if you have it in the contract, but if no one can ever find it, and AP, when they have to pay the invoice, has no way of knowing that this supplier has a standard early payment discount, there's really no way that that's going to come into place. And this has a lot of benefits. It improves the working capital management for the organization. A lot of companies can get a better yield, risk-free yield on cash that's sitting around, and it also reduces supply chain risk if suppliers have the option or can actually get paid faster when they may be struggling to have money. And this is a separate survey that we just recently concluded jointly with the Shared Services Link organization on the state of e-invoicing among finance and AP leaders. And this was an interesting tidbit that came out of that. Percent of early payment discounts captured. Shockingly few, and this was a European survey across really all European countries. 70% of the companies capture less than 50% of their available discounts, and they only have a certain amount of their spend, a minority that even has discounts. 55% captured less than 10%. Now, if this was part of a cognizant strategy to hoard cash because they don't want to pay out early, you could say fine. However, another question that asked what percent, when are they paying? And it was shocking that the majority were paying in less than 10 days. So they're paying early, but they're not getting any money for it. And typically, what we see is companies for a 30-day early payment get about 1.5%. Now, that's the equivalent of the company taking the money that's sitting around earning 0, or actually Germany even auctioned off some debt at a negative interest rate, where companies were paying them to hold their bonds. That's the equivalent of putting your money in a 30-day CD that's guaranteed by the government and getting 1% in 30 days, which on an annualized basis is about 20%, just under 20% APR. I'm not sure about you, but I would love to even get 4% nowadays in a risk-free asset. You know, it's difficult enough to get 2% anywhere, for companies less. So they are leaving huge amounts of money on the table. That's pure profit. It's completely risk-free. I mean, you're just paying a supplier early. There's really it's about as risk-free an asset as can be. And companies just aren't doing this. Now, another telling thing here is that when you look at companies that have e-invoicing versus those that don't, huge gap. Those with e-invoicing capturing around 50%, those, or 70% of them, those without any plans, 70% capturing less than 20% of their discounts. Also, shocking disparity. Now, the fact that you're still only seeing around 50% with the e-invoicing probably means that they just have e-invoicing. It's not integrated with P2P, so they don't have full visibility. They're not working together with procurement to ensure that they have visibility into what contracts they can actually get discounts on. So there's still room for improvement because they're probably not addressing all the pillars. But just having that automation for that part of the process automatically gives them a big increase there. And just to leave with a couple success stories. And this is a leading North American discount retailer. They really struggled capturing their early payment discounts. And it was a big criteria for them. They had a lot of cash, significant cash flow, and they couldn't have any kind of a significant yield. So they deployed Ariba P2P, looking at the whole process, as well as the discount management. And this was driven with procurement and AP working together. And then the yield, I'll just highlight a couple here, is they were actually getting an average of 24% APR on the cash. I mean, drastically, you know, a multiple, many times, actually exponential. You can add a decimal place and more to what they can get anywhere else. So significant return. It also did a great benefit to the company as far as the functions working together and seeing the value. NSG Group is a local UK-based global leader in glass technology. And I'd say a fairly familiar story. When Tom Ray, the CPO, came in, procurement was extremely transactional, very dispersed, a lot of the typical challenges we hear at big companies, a lot of maverick spending, and procurement also was not particularly respected. So he really focused on a couple things. One, he did bring in the automation, and you can see he also worked with finance and brought in the e-invoicing solution based on their requirements, as well as a strategic sourcing suite. And then he spent a significant amount of time retooling the organization, meaning training his members, as well as bringing in people with a completely different skill set. And after a couple years, he has a drastic improvement in the morale, the kind of career opportunities for the procurement function, and their overall visibility within the organization. It's been a complete turnaround, and to hear him tell it, it's more extreme a difference from where they were than I could probably articulate here. So significant improvement just in the overall value of the function, the career opportunities presented to the individuals, and of course value to the organization. And the last slide, just to summarize, network enterprises significantly more likely to drive more value to their organization, from market share, profit margins, so forth. Better alignment between finance and procurement at the companies that do it effectively drives a significant value for both functions. Frees up capacity for both, adds overall value. And CFOs are increasingly looking to procurement to add more value to them. From the survey results, they want it. They realize that things still need to be done. There's still a gap. But they're looking for more value, so those functions that choose to take it up do themselves a great favor. They're giving them a lot of visibility, career opportunities, and of course, adding value to the organization. But you do have to first address the main obstacles, which is around automation, the right skill set, and ensuring you have the right communication process in place. And again, from an opportunity perspective, cost savings, of course, from process savings is always a huge benefit, but also working capital management and to some extent supply chain risk as well are probably the areas where you can add the most value.